reproductive system. I will require you to bring one thing to class because we're going to look at the plant reproductive system. So could you bring a flower? Okay. I will give all of you one flower, right? My favorite flower. So I'll give it to you for you to dissect apart. But on your part, I'd like you to bring a flower of your own that you like to investigate for yourself. This flower that you bring, please don't let it be too small. Don't like go to the grass patch downstairs, you see one small little white flower, you pluck that one. You won't see much from it. Bring a flower that's substantially big that you can tear apart and have a look. Get on? So you can go NTUC, buy a bundle, then you share the flower from there. Okay? But I will provide everyone one template flower through which we will learn about the structures and you investigate your own flower from there. Okay? So that is the thing I would like you to prepare for. I hope you downloaded your notes for standby. Today our agenda is simple. We're just going to look at sexual and asexual reproduction. We'll look at the structures of the human reproductive system. The next time I see you in the lab on Thursday, we will then look at the structures of the plant reproductive system. Okay? Now, if you are in the SLS, I would like to give you a broad overview of what we're going to do in this large chapter. Okay. In this broad 2 chapters of reproductive system, we will look at the same key questions. What are the parts? How do they work together? Last but not least, what happens if there's a disruption? Not very different from what we've done in the renal system. Yeah? So you'll find for the first few lessons, we'll spend a lot of time on the parts, which is what we're going to start with today. After we know the parts, then we'll investigate how they work together so that plants and humans can reproduce. Last but not least, we'll look at what happens if we disrupt the reproductive system. Today we will focus on the parts of the reproductive system, more specifically human reproductive system. But before we go into that, I'd just like to see how much you know about sexual and asexual reproduction. I'm going to screen a quick video for a quick recap of what I think some of you have learned before, after which we'll just do a quick MCQ to see how much you understand, and then we'll fill in the blanks from there. Okay, sexual and asexual reproduction.
When I was 6 years old, I went through a phase where I was really into plants. My sister never really went through a plant phase, although to be fair, she was also 2 years old at the time, so she's kind of into everything. I wanted to have a lot of plants where I could water them and take care of them, but my plant caring skills were not so great, so only some plants were safe. A cactus, perhaps. But you get sick of cacti. One day it so happened, my dad brought home a spider plant. And as usual, the way I imagined a spider plant turned out to not exactly be what a spider plant was, but I was also very happy it wasn't a cactus. Take really good care of this spider plant and it will have little baby plants, my dad said. Then you can plant the plantlets and they'll grow into new spider plants too. It'll be fun, he said. Let's just say I think my dad may have underestimated my dedication with this. Spider plants reproduce by making new identical baby spider plantlets. The baby plants are genetically identical to the parent plant, meaning they contain the same DNA, a clone basically. You can plant the plantlets and ta-da, new spider plant. As a kid, I didn't realize that what I was seeing at the time was asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction requires only one organism and results in offspring that are genetically identical, uniform, no genetic variety. And many times there can be an advantage that this can be efficient and fast, since only one organism is involved. Asexual reproduction also occurs with very simple organisms, like bacteria. These prokaryotes literally split into two in a process known as binary fission. Many single-cell eukaryotic organisms, like many protists, can do this too. Another type of asexual reproduction that starts with B is budding. A very small, amazing animal called the hydra can reproduce by budding. That means they literally just bud an identical offspring right off of themselves. It falls off and grows into a new hydra. reproduction involves a uniting of gametes, which are reproductive cells, to make a new organism. If you're talking about animals, typically these gametes would be known as a sperm cell from the male organism and an egg cell from the female organism. Gametes typically have half the number of chromosomes as a somatic cell. So in humans, sperm and egg cells each have 23 chromosomes. When they combine, they can produce a new cell, a fertilized egg known as a zygote, which would then have 46 chromosomes. This fertilized egg can continue to divide to make more cells and more cells. Oh look, this fertilized human egg cell is a blastocyst now. Yeah, we'll keep dividing from there. Now, while that was an example of gametes uniting to make a new human, realize that all new organisms that result from sexual reproduction have the potential to be genetically diverse. In sexual reproduction, the offspring are not clones. They receive genetic information from their two different parents. And gametes themselves tend to be different from each other due to independent assortment and crossing over, which both happen when the gametes are made in a process called meiosis. Check out our meiosis video for more about that. So the gametes are different from each other, and they combine to make a unique organism. Now, sexual reproduction can be more time-consuming because it does require two gametes finding each other and uniting. A little more complicated than asexual reproduction when, in many cases, you can just split. So then what is the benefit in sexual reproduction, and why could this even matter? Well, different genes can mean different express traits, and different express traits could be beneficial in the case of environmental changes. Let's consider these grasshoppers. Let's say the vegetation present changes due to a dry season, and now some colors of grasshoppers have better advantages than others in blending in, which means perhaps better advantages from hiding from predators. Those grasshoppers with the advantage potentially could have higher fitness, but see, that variation is present in the first place because of sexual reproduction. There are definite benefits that come with variety. Well, that's it for the Mupa sisters, and remind you to stay curious.
Okay, so at the core of it all, if I were to simplify sexual and asexual reproduction, in sexual reproduction, you require often two different genders, the male and the female. Both of them are able to produce what we call gametes. We've heard of these words before. Yeah? So, when was the last time we heard of the word gametes? Okay, it would have been in the topic of cell division, meiosis. Okay? When your cells in your sexual organs undergo meiosis, you get a sperm and an egg. So what is sexual reproduction? Sexual reproduction requires the fusion of a sperm and an egg. And from there, you get a new individual that will go on in life, asexual reproduction. But the beauty of this mergence, this fusion, is that we learned from our previous chapter of meiosis that sperms and eggs, they produce, the sperms and eggs that we produce are genetically very different. Right? It's like we shuffle the card each time a sperm and an egg is produced. So no two babies will be the same, even though from the same set of parents. You have siblings, but you and your sibling do not look exactly the same. It's because with every sperm and egg that mommy and daddy produced, there was a shuffle. That's sexual reproduction. But when we look at asexual reproduction, very often, we do not even need a mom or a dad. Just one will do. Then how in the world do we produce one, become another? Well, through the process of another cell division that you know of, mitosis. Very often mitosis is involved in this process. It's just a matter of the same cells dividing and dividing and dividing, and you get an identical copy of the other individual, asexual reproduction. What is required of you for this section of the topic is for you to be able to compare and contrast these two. What are the differences, what are the similarities between the two? Sexual and asexual reproduction. If I get you to refer to your notes, you will find a comparison table that has been presented to you already. Okay, so I will not dwell too much into the comparison because this is something that has already been organized quite neatly for you. Okay, sexual and asexual reproduction, a comparison is what is required for this segment of the learning. But just so that we scope ourselves a little bit more, what we're going to learn from now onwards, we are going to focus a lot on sexual reproduction. Okay? Although I ask you to be able to compare the two, we are going to focus a lot on sexual, not so much asexual. Okay? Let's take this time to do question 1. Question 1 asks, which of the following describes asexual reproduction? Are you able to choose the options that best represents asexual reproduction? And we'll have a little bit of a discussion from there. May I get you to try just question 1? Question 1 is just ask which of the following describes asexual reproduction. After that, we'll look at a few examples. We'll try to figure out whether what we see is asexual or sexual. For those that are done with question 1, may I get you to look up? It's the MCQ question. It's the multiple choice one. I'll just wait around a minute more. Then we'll go through this. Then we'll have a quick discussion on the 3 animals you see below. Okay, ready? Let's have a look at the options. Which of the following describes asexual reproduction? Okay, the form of reproduction that does not involve fusion between sperm and egg. First option typically does not involve production of haploid gametes. That is true. Right, so you take that option. If you see the word haploid gametes refer to sperm and egg. Okay, so if you ever see gametes again, even in plant reproduction, they're referring to the sperm and egg. What is haploid? Haploid means half the number of chromosomes that the normal cell has. Right? We know that in humans, if we just take a random cell from your body, you have 46 chromosomes. But a sperm and egg has only 23 chromosomes within each of them. And for logical reason, because when these two come together, they will restore the 46. If we don't have this split, every baby that comes out will have more and more and more chromosomes. It will be quite disastrous. Okay, so that's what haploid gametes mean. A quick recap. Second point, offspring are genetically dissimilar from each other and from parents. Okay, this is not true. In asexual reproduction, the offspring are often referred to as clones. They are almost identical to the parent. Do we carry out asexual reproduction? What about twins? But twins are genetically identical to each other. Okay, so twins are not formed out of asexual reproduction. It is formed out of sexual reproduction. Then later on, at the zygote stage, they will split into two, and they are genetically similar from there. Hey, actually, come to think of it, it's almost as though these two fellas, at the baby stage, they asexually reproduce to form two. Okay, but we don't count that as asexual reproduction. Okay, so point to note, a relatively large number of offspring is formed. That's actually true. Asexual reproduction is much easier, much faster to carry out. Often you'll find a lot of offspring in this format. Imagine if I could carry out asexual reproduction, I'm very bored at home, right? You'll find after 10 days, 10 more me's. Maybe that's crazy. Offspring are genetically identical to each other in parent. That's true. A rate of reproduction is relatively slower. That's not true. Actually, it's pretty fast. Sexual reproduction, you find often in animals require some sort of courtship. Right? They need to first find a male or a female, take time to breed a relationship, then something special will happen. Last but not least, involves production and fusion of two haploid gametes. This is not true. This refers more to sexual reproduction. Okay, so you've done a quick introduction into the two forms. But now moving forward, we're going to spend a lot of time on sexual reproduction. Let's look at the three examples below. Starfish, bees and ants, and flatworms. What do you think? Do you think these organisms are carrying out sexual or asexual reproduction based on their description below? Okay, may I get everyone in the next few minutes to cut down your ideas? Then we'll have a look at some of the responses from there. Thanks, Cynthia. While you fill this up, we have a bit of time. I'll bring up my insect collection so you can look at some bees and ants for real. Okay? Hold on. many of you have applied? Flatworms. You can watch this together later. It's quite interesting. Okay, let's have a look at our first organism today. Starfish. Here it says, some species of starfish are able to grow in tiny organisms from just a fragment of itself. And they say that the new organism is genetically identical. So which form of reproduction is this? Look at some of your responses. Reproduction is asexual because you find that the organisms, the babies are genetically identical. And that's quite a common response from a lot of you, that is genetically identical. Anything slightly different? Natalie says that you think it's asexual also because it's taking a part of yourself. You really just take a cell from itself to grow more cells. Rayan says that the new starfish comes from an original fragment of the parent starfish. It's a fragment of the parent starfish, not that the cell or gametes will form in any way. So, is this a form of asexual reproduction? It is. Starfish can carry out asexual reproduction in a way that we just described, fragmentation. Here, in this image, actually they are showing you fragments of the same starfish at different stages of their asexual reproduction. The original big starfish, with legs broken off, thrown to the side, give it a few days, they will start to grow other parts of its own. Asexual reproduction. I'd like to show you another organism who can carry out asexual reproduction, and I find it pretty cool. Okay, so you watch this advertisement, I watch that now. Give me more cheap.
Thanks to Curiosity Stream for supporting PBS Digital Studios.
This goopy little guy is called a Planarian. Sure, it's just a flatworm at the bottom of a pond, but it has a very special superpower, one that scientists would love to harness. To show you, well, it's gonna get a little bit slasher movie here. Okay, don't worry. It's going to be okay. Seriously. I promise. It doesn't even hurt. That would be curtains for most organisms. I mean, this piece here is just a chunk with no head and no tail. But watch. You can see under a microscope that overnight its wound heals closed. Okay, maybe we could do that. More slowly, of course. But then it starts to regenerate, growing new tissue. It's that white part, called the blastema. In a week, see those tiny little spots? They're new eyes grown from scratch. But the Planarian, can I call it that yet? It still kind of looks like a blob. By day 12, it's starting to look like a proper Planarian. It's got a head, an entirely new one, and a new tail. And it's doing its regular Planarian things, like pooping. That's because one of the first things it started regrowing was a tube called the pharynx, which is how things go in and out. It sucks up food, like this beef liver that scientists are feeding it. up 1/5 of a Planarian's body. They can turn into different kinds of cells and make every new body part. We only have stem cells that act like these when we're embryos. Once we grow up, we pretty much lose this ability. Though doctors have been able to get us to grow back a fingertip. But what if we could grow ourselves anew? A whole arm or a liver? Scientists are trying to figure out exactly how planarians do it. And maybe one day, these humble flatworms could inspire new ways to heal our injuries.
Okay, so I think first thing that probably pops into your mind is why can't we do the same? That's because we mentioned earlier, these flatworms have a very special group of cells, stem cells. These stem cells allow them to grow parts that regrow parts that we don't quite have anymore. You can find these stem cells when we go back. One egg, one sperm fused together, and then we form first our zygote. At the zygote stage, and it develops slowly into a ball of cells called embryo, that's when we still have stem cells. But once we grow into an adult like yourself or a baby, these stem cells are not quite present anymore. But in some organisms, they are still very much present. It allows them to, after you cut off parts here and there, regrow themselves. And that's what they are making use of to carry out asexual reproduction. Look at our second group of organisms, bees and ants. I love bees and ants. You often find bees and ants not as single organisms and find them often in a colony, right? A large group of them, ants and bees. Most recently, I found this bee lying at the atrium. If you are very observant, you can find these bees. Sometimes they die, they will land at the atrium. You can pass around. Okay, this bee is blue. Shiny. I have a few more of these beads. Yeah, it's real. Yeah, okay, so you can pass those around. I have a few of them. All found at the atrium. This one here. Sorry? So after I collect them, I'll soak them in alcohol, and I'll leave it to dry. Okay, so what you're passing down now is a bee that is slightly blue in color. That blue is not because of a pigment, it's because of the small little scales on its body that reflects light in a certain way. So it ends up looking blue. These are quite special. And if you see the description here, they can carry out this process called Partnerogenesis. And in Partnerogenesis, what happens is this. If we have a bee, our idea, right, is that, organisms produce sperm, produce egg. They are haploid. But in desperate conditions, sometimes bees can do this. Bees could produce eggs that are not haploid, but diploid. So imagine, okay, let's say the bee's diploid number of chromosomes is also 46. Let's say, these are, if they want to carry out Partnerogenesis, they will just produce an egg that also contains 46 chromosomes. This is a form of asexual reproduction. Nothing more than using mitosis to produce one more egg. And from there, the egg can develop into another bee that is genetically identical from the other. This one way bees and ants can expand their colony really fast, even if they cannot find a king. Yeah? So actually bees and ants can carry out both sexual and asexual. You can find a king, a male ant that they can mate with, get sperms. You could end up with offspring that are genetically all different. In desperate conditions where you cannot find a male, they could resort to Partnerogenesis, where they just I produce an egg, many eggs, they are all diploid, I just produce many versions of myself. I do have male bees that I managed to find. So I'd like to show you a difference between a female bee and a male bee. This bee is extremely huge because they are carpenter bees. Okay, I have two bees actually. These carpenter bees, right, actually you find them solitary by themselves. They live at the base of trees, they dig holes and then they live there. This is a female version. Later you pass around, you see the males have very large eyes and the female's eyes are smaller. I'm not exactly sure why. Okay, so I'm going to pass around, I think I should pass around as a pair. female and male. Okay, male and female bees. On this side of the house, I'm about to pass around ants. I love ants. Yes, I have ant colony at home, 2 years old already. I found a queen ant during COVID season, then I put it inside a bottle, and it has just produced eggs endlessly. And I have tons of ants right now, going into the thousands. So I'm about to pass around an ant. Believe it or not, this is an ant. Okay, this is the largest ant you can find in the world, and you can happen to find it in Singapore. So, this is the largest ant you can find in Southeast Asia. This is called the giant forest ant. So if you go to Bukit Timah area, you'll be able to find one of these ants running around. Okay, it's extremely huge. Careful the needle. I'm the queen of the ant also. This is the queen of the giant forest ant, capable of carrying out sexual, asexual reproduction, really depending on the conditions of the environment. Have you ever seen ants with wings? Okay, they are not a special breed of ants. They are queen ants. So if you ever see ants with wings and you crush them, you are essentially crushing one whole colony of future colony away. Yeah? Are you the kind that will put one bucket of water and let all the ants fly in with the wings? Actually, you are killing lots of potential colonies. Which one? Yeah, all these insects, right, I just see them lying around. Yeah, I see them. I'm very lucky to find intact specimens that are not broken down. And a lot of them contributed by students also. If they were to see something, then they'll just pass to me. Like my most recent find is this giant moth. This is a moth. Yeah? This is the second largest moth in the world. And then you can find it in Singapore. It is called an atlas moth. Because people think that the patterns on the wing look a little bit like the patterns on a map, atlas, no? So this is an atlas moth, one of the largest ones you can find in the world and in Singapore. Okay. And what I find interesting also is that if you look at ants ants and bees, you also find them in very large numbers, right? Yes, question? Right, how do queen ants come about? From my understanding, even in bees and queens, right, sometimes what makes a queen depends on what they are being fed. So their genes may be exactly the same, but what genes are expressed at the end of the day determined by the environment, what you feed them. Yeah. So if I'm not wrong, for bees, if I want different kinds of bees to develop, then the bees will feed their babies different things. Feed them a certain thing, they'll become a certain kind of, they'll grow up to be a certain way. If you look at identical twins, they don't grow up to be exactly identical. Right? It really depends on the conditions. Put one in the sun all the day, right? You become more thin. Feed one more, you'll become bigger in size also. So genes play one part, but a lot of the other things play another role. Last but not least, we have reproduction in flatworms. Earlier on, we saw one way that flatworms can reproduce by chopping them up into fragments and they can asexually reproduce. But you know most flatworms are hermaphrodites, meaning they are both male and female. They have both male and female organs. So how? I'd like to show you a very interesting video I saw online of how flatworms can reproduce sexually.
Flatworms have both male and female sex organs.
Beautiful, right? Like ribbons, you know, on the seafloor.
They have to decide who plays which role. And that they fight over.
The flatworms are about to fight to determine who will be the male, who will be the female. Yeah. Okay, you know what?
Those gentlemen females hard webbings placed unintentionally horizontally. They're actually Morrow's penises, a double-barreled inseminator. If they can shoot first,
You see those two things coming out?
flatworm sex
Okay, those are the penises of the flatworm. They are about to fight.
and inseminate each other.
The one that pierces the other will win. Win lah. He will become the male. The one that gets pierced will become the female.
Flatworms have been known to gouge holes in each other in battles lasting up to a minute. Why they cross swords? Producing offspring requires a lot of energy. Women and father can go after and without any further responsibility. The losing mother absorbs the winner's sperm. It must now work longer and harder to find food and stay alive.
Okay, so that's sperm over there that you see.
Father floats merrily along.
So if you didn't catch what the video was saying, why fight, right? Why fight over being male or female? Because one of the reasons they fight is because at the end of the day, the female gets pregnant, right? She uses up a lot of resources. They have to carry a lot of babies. So they fight for it. Then the male, this useless male, after many win, right, he'll just won in life. Yeah, I'm not saying humans do this too. But when we look at flatworms, that's one of the reasons why they fight. But they can carry out both sexual and asexual reproduction. When you look into the animal kingdom, a lot of organisms can carry out both. And very often you'll find they are very small organisms, not the big ones. You know some lizards can also carry out asexual reproduction. They also can carry out Partnerogenesis, eggs that can hatch without any male fertilization. Same process. Okay, so, but let's look at some of the responses. Here, is this asexual or sexual? Okay, Ian thinks it's sexual because there's fusion of haploid cells, gametes. Yes, there's a talk about sperms and eggs, so it's sexual in nature. C says it's asexual because only one parent is needed for reproduction. And since the flatworms have both male and female, okay, yes. Right, okay, so if you did not watch the video, actually one would think this, if this organism has both male and female, then you own self, don't know, like you poke yourself, I don't know. But is that sexual or asexual? Okay, I don't know of any organism that has both male and female on the same body that can carry out sexual. Okay, usually I've never seen a case like that. Okay, so in this case they fight over it on the right, okay. So what about plants? You know flowers? Right? Don't flowers have male and female parts? You learned this in primary school? Let's say I'm going to draw a flower right now. These are the petals. These are the anthers. And then this is the stigma over here. And we often refer to this part as the female. And then the anthers are the male parts, right? And you've learned before that if a pollen grain lands on its own stigma, the pollen grain could go down and it could fertilize the female part over here. So a question for you, is it sexual or asexual reproduction? If you say it's sexual, why do you say sexual? If you say it's asexual, why asexual? Okay, why asexual? Okay, only one flower. Only one flower. Okay, but then you say sexual can only involve one organism. Do you have an example of an organism that can carry out sexual reproduction by itself? Plants. Okay, so if all else fails, the best definition for sexual reproduction is this part. If you have a sperm and an egg fusing to each other. Okay, so having one parent or two parents, that is not the main thing that defines sexual reproduction. It's really whether you have an egg and a sperm fusing with each other. And therefore, if you look at a flower, if the pollen grain from its own flower lands on itself, and the sperm and the egg fuses with each other, that is still sexual reproduction, not asexual. Okay? That's why I want to make big emphasis that whatever we're going to do from now onwards, is mainly sexual in nature. Okay? Actually, even myself as a student, I would think that it's asexual because one parent. But until I started growing up, then my mommy and daddy tell me that she got a sperm and egg. Right? There is a different story. Okay? So, this is sexual. Thank you. And is it a preneck? Okay, then this is the D. Thank you. Okay, right now we're going to therefore start off the next chapter proper on human reproductive system. I believe you know quite a lot from lower JH as well as from primary school. So this is our next task for today. Oops. May I get you to go to the next tab, section B. I want to see how much, sorry, not section B, we skip section C. Section B we'll do the leg next week. I'd like you to go to part 1 and click on this link over here that says Sketchfab. When you click on Sketchfab, it will bring you to 3D models of the male and female reproductive system. On this model, I'd like you to screenshot and label as many of the parts possible. Right? Then and submit them. Then in a while, we will run through the various parts of the male and female reproductive system. Don't work alone, work with a friend.
I wanted to speak as much Korean as possible when I got here. I've actually taken a variety of different lessons on italki. I've taken topic classes, general Korean classes, academic Korean classes, and free talk classes on italki. And it's been really helpful to me to be able to work with teachers that already know my strengths and weaknesses and take different types of lessons so that I can focus on different areas of my Korean abilities, especially considering that I have a lot of lessons with italki.
Okay, for additional resource, if you have the link for Lumos on hand, you go to Lumos, go to Human Repro System. I have the male and female Repro System sliced into half. So what you saw was the unsliced version. This is the sliced cross-section version. Okay? I'd like you to label as much as possible, and then we will fill in the blanks from there on. Label and then you trace the part you read. Oh, okay, or sperm. Yeah, give you around 7 minutes more. There you go. And then once you've submitted, then we can fill in the blanks from there. Wow, complicated. Mute this one. Then create another one. Then I create that one. Let's go Tuesday one. Okay, for those that are more or less done, you can also have access to Lumos for the cross section. You can find on Google Classroom. I've embedded the link there. okay, this time we'll look at some of your friends' responses. Then you can touch up your labels. Okay, I will spend some time filling in the blanks on what you can't quite remember. We also very quickly talk about some of the functions of these parts. Okay, so that you don't worry so much. We look at all these parts. I expect only the briefest idea of what the function is. You don't need to go and memorize in depth all the functions, down to the very fine details. You roughly know its purpose generally, okay? Because I won't be asking you to write an essay on this. Yeah, there are a lot of other things I can ask you on to write an essay. So instead, when you look at such an image, what skill comes to mind is to identify. Every time we come to the chapter on systems, you see parts of a system. Usually, what we want you to do is be able to identify, and which is what we're doing here. So let's look at the structure of the male reproductive system. This is done by Debbie. Okay, this entire structure here is the penis. She has labeled this part as the urethra, but truth be told, you cannot quite see it. Okay, where is the urethra? The urethra can only be seen if you do a quick cross section of it. Here is a cross section of the penis. So where's the urethra here? The urethra is this opening here from the tip all the way going backwards. And what is this therefore? The bladder. We go upwards some more. Up this tube is the renal system, just came from it, right? So from bladder you go up. What is before the bladder? Oh no, it starts with a U also. Urethra. Urethra go to the? What? It starts with a K. Yeah, just go to the kidney lah. Okay? Okay, but if you really go into the details, from urethra go to renal pelvis, go to the collecting duct, then go backwards. Okay? So understand that actually the human reproductive system as well as the renal system are very intricately linked. So one could pee out a kidney stone. Yeah, so it's that linked up. Okay, so urethra is a tube through the penis. Okay? Therefore, the label provided by Debbie, she tried her best to try to show where the urethra is. Okay, let's look at other parts. Yes, she labeled this as the testis. Males have two. Can function with one, can function with one. Can function without either, can also. It's not life-threatening without testicles. But we'll learn later on that testicles produce hormones. So that is what, if the guy finds it important, then it's important. Okay, let's look at other parts. The scrotum. Okay, so the scrotum was labeled as, Debbie, where do you label the scrotum? This one?
Bottom part.
Okay, the bottom part. Okay, what all the images do not show is the scrotum. So you need to know that the testicles don't just hang free and they are not embedded within the male. Okay? So I think a misconception that some people have is that the testicles are embedded within the male. It's not. It's like hanging in a sac of skin, a pouch, and that's what a scrotum is. Okay? If they are external structures, not internal. I don't know how you're going to draw this. You can draw a pouch, I guess, and you label it as scrotum. Okay? Next, you find this pouch above each testicle. That's called epididymis. Right? That's where sperms are stored for a little while more after it's produced. That's also where sperms go through maturation. Right? When sperms are first produced in the testicles, not quite mature yet. But in this area is where they mature fully. That's the epididymis. And I appreciate that Debbie is tracing the path that sperm takes, and she's quite right. So from the testicles, the testis, it will go by the epididymis, which is like the storage pouch. Then from there, you'll go down. Then you'll enter this long tube over here, the vas deferens. Believe it or not, the vas deferens is also muscular in nature. So peristalsis can occur. Yeah? It helps to channel the sperms from the epididymis out. From here, you'll find that the vas deferens will connect. You cannot quite see how it connects in this diagram over here. So I'm going to have a look right now. Debbie has also labeled a lot of things along the way. Seminal vesicle, prostate gland, this big one over here, and then the seminal vesicle. Now let's look at it from a cross-section point of view. Here we slice it in half, right? So how does everything flow? We look at the testicle over here, the epididymis, sperm will go up, over here. Let's follow where the tube goes. The tube will then go underneath. Can I remove this? Okay, let's remove it. Left side of now this. Let me delete that part. Okay, delete. Right, let's look over here. Now you see where the vas deferens connects to? The vas deferens connects to the seminal vesicle. So if you look at this connection point down here, remove this muscle also. Bye-bye. Okay, let's remove all of it. Okay, let's look over here. The vas deferens looks up, comes down, and connects to this large organ here called the prostate gland. Above the prostate gland, you'll see two glands connecting to the prostate gland area also. Okay? So that is the seminal vesicle, the brain-like structure over there. Below over here is the prostate gland. That's one perspective, but if we look at it from the other perspective, then you can see how it connects also. Okay? If I were to just sum up, what are the purpose of these glands? They provide nutrients, lubricants for the sperm. Okay, that is the general summary, what these organs are for. Okay, sperm by themselves won't survive in the harsh realities of the external world. So they require a lot of nutrients to keep them alive once they're out. Okay? Anything else that Debbie labeled? Okay, that's about it. Right? So what's the key thing you need to know for the male reproductive system? At the very least, be able to identify the parts. Second, be able to trace the pathway that sperm takes. You need to know how it leaves the body. If you look at your textbook, that's a good place you can also try to trace. Yeah, I believe you can go to the male repro system and there you can trace the process, the movement of sperm out also. So over here, this way you can do a little bit of tracing on your notes. From the testicles, testis, the epididymis, vas deferens, loops around, goes through the prostate gland, out the urethra and out of the male body. Okay, that is a quick trace. Did you know for males, sperm and urine take the same path out? Okay, mean, there's only one part or opening that sperm and urine can take. Then the next logical question you may ask is, how is the body able to restrict the flow? Right? Wouldn't it be disastrous if sperm and egg both come out together? What did I say? No, if sperm and urine both come out together, urine is quite acidic with all the urea, uric acid inside. Then you go and mix it with the sperm, or it's like the sperm immediately drown inside the urine. Okay, so these two things aren't meant to mix. So how? Okay, so luckily males, at the very base of the bladder, there are muscles there that can constrict. Okay? So when it's time for sperms to come out, that muscle underneath the bladder will constrict so that no pee will come out at the same time. And when it's time for sperms to come out, did I say sperm? When it's time for urine to come out, then urine will come out. Okay, one last thing about the male reproductive system. I need to emphasize that there is no cartilage or bone, okay, in the penis. It is just muscle. What am I saying? Sorry, there is no muscle in there either. Okay, so it's quite amazing, no muscle, no bone, no cartilage. So how in the world can it go through this process of being erect? Well, because this tissue over here is spongy, it can fill up with blood. Just like how you blow a very long balloon, you and then it becomes quite solid, right? Then you can twist it into many shapes. No, you can't do that with this, but you can fill it, it can be filled up with blood. Okay, so that's the male reproductive system. Let's look at the female reproductive system. Although there seems to be less, there are less parts, right, when we look at the female reproductive system. Here I have the cross section of it, and we'll look at some of the descriptions, labels provided by your friends. For the female reproductive system, I think it's best appreciated when you look at it on the inside. Okay, because on the outside you can only see certain things, and then on the inside you see a little bit more. Okay, let's view all the responses. Let's have a look at Kayla's response. Okay, the female reproductive system. I just noticed okay, if you want to, you can go ahead and VR this and you can see it, right? Spin it in front of you. Okay, so this is the female reproductive system. Here, she has labeled this as the uterus. Okay? These are the fallopian tubes. Do you know that the fallopian tubes, you see these two ends over here, they are not connected to the ovaries. Okay, so it's a misconception to think that the ovaries are connected to the fallopian tube. It's not. You know the fallopian tube, this opening over here, can move around the ovary. Depending on where the egg is going to pop out, it will move to the relevant area to receive the egg. Right? It's like a vacuum cleaner head that will move around the ovary to make sure that the egg gets in. So how is the ovary being propped up? By this ligament over here. You see this ligament over here? It actually connects to the exterior of the uterus. So that's how it props up the ovary. I used to think as a kid that this is connected to the fallopian, but it's not. Okay? And indeed, these are the ovaries. Okay? Here, label up here is the cervix, but you can only appreciate what the cervix is if we look at cross-section later on. The vagina is this long tube or opening through which the baby will come out from. For females, this is not the pathway that pee comes out. Okay? For females, this is not the pathway through pee comes out. Not like males, same pathway for the sperm and for the urine. Let's look at the cross section now. If you look at the cross section, this is the side view. Where is the uterus? The uterus is this large organ over here. Yeah, that's the uterus. You can also see that there's a small gap here That's where the baby will develop in, if there's a baby. Where is the cervix? Okay, earlier on, the cervix was labeled by Kayla at the base of that large round thing, right? If you look at the inside, you'll find that the cervix is over here. What the cervix is really just like an opening. Right? It is an opening that will open up when it's time for a baby to come out, and will be constricted when the baby is still developing. You don't want a baby to come out halfway. Okay, so this is where the cervix is. Think of it as a muscular ring. And this will open up a good 20 many times for the baby to come out. Where's the vagina? It is this opening over here through which the baby will come out. It looks very small. It is very small. Therefore, it needs to expand a lot more for the baby to come out. Hey, where are the ovaries for this one? Oh, here it is. Okay, so you see tucked over there. Wow, so nicely cushioned. Okay, so this is the ovary. This is the ligament over here. Then you can see the fallopian tubes coming out. And then there's this part where it is, enveloping the ovary, where depending where the egg is going to come out from. Yes? Question? Oh. Alright, now let's look at this diagram here. I ask you, therefore, where's the urethra? Right, this was the vagina. What's the urethra? Okay, this one? This one, okay, this is the urethra. See how much shorter the urethra is compared to the male's one? And so females are a little bit more prone to getting urinary tract infection. Very short runway, bacteria can go up very easily. This is the bladder, therefore. See how close the bladder is? The bladder is actually in front of the uterus, or the womb. Then what in the world is this? No, this is not the butt. Okay, this is the rectum, right? This is where poop is stored. So, if you look at the female repro system, okay, don't count this as a part of the repro system. But I'm just saying that there are 3 openings at the end of the day. One for poop, one for baby, one for urine. Okay? As a little kid, I thought my mom shit me out. But it doesn't make any sense, right? That means I will have to be developed in the rectum. Huh? Your mom also cannot pee you out, because then you have to be developed in the bladder. Okay? So there are 3 openings for females. Let's look at the male. Here's the male. I think I removed too much. Okay. How do I give back the male parts? Okay, let me restart the whole thing. Okay, for males, 2 openings. One for poop and one for pee. And one shared between pee and between sperm. Okay, so here is the male's rectum. Poop will come out through here. And this opening here is where both urine will come out from, the urethra, as well as where the sperm will come out from. So the testicle will go up and then join back at the urethra at the base. Okay? So bottom line, therefore, when we look at the parts of the repro system, you'll be able to identify. Give me a brief function of them. And last but not least, be able to trace the pathway that these few things take. Okay, so for example, sperm, urine. Okay, I want to ask for poop. Okay, so baby, be able to differentiate which one comes out from which opening. Okay? If not, when I'm marking, just give me a good laugh. I don't mind. Maybe it's quite funny. One year I asked them to draw, where the sperm and egg after fusing will implant themselves. So there are many places, if you look at the diagram over here, right, if you don't know the structure very well, there are many places that you think you can implant. They look quite spacious. So a lot of students implant the baby inside the bladder, right? Okay, so just be able to do this as a skill. Is it time's up already? Almost. Is it recess after this? Okay, I will not go in depth for the how you can disrupt reproductive system for male and females. In lower JH, you learn several ways, right? You can snip and then you tie, right? Tubal ligation, all those processes. So those are things we will not cover again. Okay. So the next time around when I see you will be in the lab on Thursday. Next Thursday, please bring a flower. If I can remember, I'll remind you. And if you don't bring a flower, then you use my template flower. Yeah? And then we'll go into the plant repro system. Alright, and that's all. I think you all came over recess earlier. Alright, thank you. You can stop the recording. Next week, bye.